No, I'd actually intended to. I'd intended to close up for the night and go to bed, but it's getting quite late. But I had to make a video on this because it's an update on one of the most infamous characters that we ever dealt with. There was such such a response on this guy. But for those of you who have been with us for a while, you will recognize the name Alan the Canadian. Well, just to give you a little background for those of you who haven't heard of Alan the Canadian, Alan was a little bit like the Mitch character in that, like Mitch, the Australian who came from somewhere like Romania, Alan the Canadian came, where did he come from? I don't know. He was Hungarian or something, and he'd gone to Canada and he'd taken citizenship. But then he'd met some young woman, very attractive lady, and he over here, and I don't think that they were never married, but they had a child. They had a little girl. Well, it was quite a saga because when we were called, actually, as I recall it now, it's coming back to me. He was another one that arrived on our doorstep. He'd heard of us helping people. So he just arrived on the doorstep on his motorcycle with his wife and child with him, and he put his case to us, and we listened. And I have to say that I didn't really believe him for a minute. It was just too tall a tale. But anyway, we actually went to see him where he was living, and he was living in very difficult conditions near a cockpit where they do cockfights. For those of you not familiar with the idea of a cockpit and you're still stuck in World War II and thinking about Spitfires. Well, we went to see him. He was in very, very difficult conditions in a tiny little room that was like a tiny little cabin, and he was there with his wife, and we'll say it was his wife and child, and he had been threatened by people at the cockpit. I'm sure that there are quite decent people who are involved in cockfighting, but as it involves gambling and probably booze as well, if you're going to go there and you're going to get involved in that kind of thing, it's kind of like anything goes. And I'm persuaded to say that there would be criminality there if you're there to look for it. So we went there, and he was in a desperate situation. Well, he was seen on our videos. You can still see. I'm sure that Beth actually titled those videos way back. What must it be now? I'm thinking that it's possibly 3 or 4 years ago. So that would give you an idea of when you should start looking to see what Alan looks like. Well, he came, and what he was looking for was the money to be able to go to Manila to sort out his visa. And he came back with a story of, no, this is what the story that he presented with us. It's a while ago, okay, and we've had a lot of people come through since. And his story was that he had gone to the embassy, and while he was there, he had taken, if I remember rightly, he'd taken some 50,000 pesos with him to try to buy his way back into good standing. So while he was there, he's there at the embassy, and the Canadian, I'm giving you the story he gave us, the Canadian ambassador came out and chatted to him, and he explained to the Canadian ambassador himself, who for that day, for some strange reason, was fielding calls from people in trouble. So the ambassador took his 50,000, but because it was the ambassador, he thought, no, I can't ask the ambassador for a receipt, can I? So he didn't. And I don't know what happened to the ambassador. I think I don't think that 50,000 pesos would have been enough to persuade the ambassador to do anything. Well, anyway, so he lost his money. So he came back. Now, because he was a Canadian, he was professing Canadian citizenship, and I think that we did see his passport. So Canadian passport. Two fellow Canadians who didn't know him sent us, let me see if I'm, you might go back and find some of my figures are wrong, but as I remember, they sent us something like 17,000 pesos, which we gave to him. And the 17,000 pesos was enough to get him to Manila to try to sort out what his problem was. He was overdue, right? So he's out of status, and he's got a wife and child, common law wife and child. So anyway, he went and spun his story there. But the side story on it was that he was looking for gold, and that this would be a very good investment to finance his search for, I'm not sure, it could be Yokohama's gold, but I think it's Hashimoto's gold. There is a legend in the Philippines that during the time of the Japanese being here, that a great deal of gold was confiscated, collected, whatever, by Mr. Hashimoto. Hashimoto is my generic name for anybody that I don't know, but I know that they're Japanese. So Hashimoto's gold it's a well-known fable, folk story, legend from the Second World War. And it was supposed to have been hidden somewhere. It's supposed to be buried somewhere. It's waiting for someone to buy one of those 1,500 peso metal detectors and just go around, and it's probably just a couple of feet underneath the soil. But the trick is where? And that is what has defeated most treasure hunters. But Alan had some insider information, and it was a good deal for him. Now, why am I telling you all of this? Why regurgitate it up? Because he was very unpopular. People, I often think that Alfred attracts a lot of negative stuff, but with Alfred, the negativity on Alfred is because he's with Marie, who is very young, looking for her age, even though I think that she's 25 or somewhere between 25 and 30, but he still gets a lot of negativity. But Alan really got negative. People called him a shyster, they called him a con merchant, don't do anything with him, do not trust him. Well, what happened in the end was that the money that the two Canadians, that was gone. Whatever it was, I'm saying it was 17,000, whatever it was, we gave to him. And as is our MO, we have made a video on that. That's what we always do. That's why we hand money over on video. People say, oh, you shouldn't do that. You should just give it quietly and anonymously. No, we run a charity. We run a charity. And people in good faith send us money to give to this person. And we give it. And we make sure that it is recorded on video. Because that's the other side of what we do. We're vloggers. So, that money, he promised to return. I will get that money back. I will pay it back. Believe me, I'll pay it back. Well, for our two very kind-hearted Canadian friends, we never got anything back. Now, we never expected to see him again. And our biggest supporter was Little Bit Rich. And Little Bit Rich felt sympathy for the girl, the wife, right? Girlfriend, wife, common law wife, and the child. And that this man was deemed by most to be a shyster. So we worked out a way that we could get him on the plane and gone. And the family of the girl would be reunited with the girl. She would have her family back. Now, as I remember, I think that we found, we supported, Little Bit Rich actually supported the girl, but it turned out that she was a strange one as well. All that she was required to do to get a generous allowance, even after he had gone, all she had to do was get a tricycle and go down to the church, Timeo's church in Burgos, and we would give her cash, a cash allowance that had been sent to us by Little Bit Rich. She didn't want to do that. Well, it's very inconvenient for me to do that, she said. You know, is it possible it can be brought up for me? Well, anyway, there was a lot more ins and outs to this story, and lo and behold, we would park the truck today, and we'd gone to a government office near the municipal gardens, and as unfortunately you couldn't stop anywhere. It's very narrow, it's motorcycles on one side and cars on the other, and I couldn't stop. And we had passed two people getting off a motorcycle, and she said, there's Alan from Canada. And she was convinced, Alan from Canada, and if she says it was Alan from Canada, it was Alan from Canada. So we went around, we found a place to park, but by that time there was no sign. And I said to her, if you see him and I don't recognize him, you tell me, because all of that money that was given to him for getting home, the two Canadians who gave money, and all of that, they didn't ask, by the way, they didn't ask for the return of that money. They just said, if the money is ever returned, then we would immediately go back in the archives and find out who they were. I'm sure that we know who they are. Well, we've seen him, he's back, and if I know anything about that guy, we'll be hearing something from him. But most people were absolutely vehement. Do not have anything to do with that man. So, that was a little snippet, really almost like a little bit of gossip. So we'll see what happens in the saga of Alan the Canadian.